In this episode of the show, I sit down with Jim Effner for a conversation about vision, conviction, resilience, and what it really takes to build a life that feels both successful and deeply aligned. Jim is known for his work in leadership, development, sales mastery, and performance coaching within the financial services industry. But this conversation really goes far beyond business. We talk about the mindset that shapes results, the internal barriers that quietly hold people back, and the kind of clarity that allows someone to keep moving even through adversity. Jim shares the philosophy behind his work, the 4 C's that drive performance, and the hard-earned lessons that came through both professional success and profound personal challenge. This is a conversation about confidence, courage, identity, and the power of knowing what you want and why it matters. If you ever have felt this tension between ambition and fulfillment, or wondered what separates those who drift from those who move forward with deep conviction, this episode will give you a lot to think about. So let's get into it. Jim Effner, welcome to the show. Thanks for spending time with us.
It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
So who is Jim Effner and what is his mission?
Wow. Right out of the gate, loaded. Who is Jim Effner? And by the way, I've been asked 1,000 questions. I don't think I've ever been asked that first one. Who is Jim Effner? I would say that my answer would be Jim Effner is an individual who lives life large, who has a big vision, who has high energy, who's big, who's loud. But when people get to know him, there's a teddy bear inside of him. He's got a big heart and he cares. He's a man of faith. He values family. He's married his high school sweetheart, been married for 36 years. 3 awesome kids, loves to play golf, loves to have fun, loves to drink wine, loves to smoke cigars, lives big, and feels blessed and lucky every day. That's who Jim Effner is.
You know, I don't want to interrupt you, Jim, but I got to say that is probably one of the most authentic answers that I ever got. And there's a lot there. So I didn't mean to stump you right off the gate. I just like to sort of get to the heart of the matter.
What? Yeah. I'm interviewed all the time. And, I just, who is Jim Effner? I mean, you could go a lot of different, but I love, authenticity in your response is what I'm all about. So I'm glad that you felt that. And then the second question is, why am I here? What was the second?
What is your mission? Yeah.
Yeah. My mission now, it's, I would say this before I answer it, and I will, is that hopefully I'm not in the 4th quarter of my personal life. I'm 58 years old. I got some time left on the earth, but I think I'm just about entering my 4th quarter of my professional life. And when I look back at it, the 1st, the 2nd, and the 3rd quarter had different purposes, different missions. And now the 4th quarter has a different one as well. Because you mature, you grow, you got wisdom, you got experience, you get older, you know what you didn't know when you were younger, and yada, yada, yada. And, my purpose, my mission now is to bring a life of abundance to financial representatives in the overall financial services industry, which the career in the industry is meant to deliver. But unfortunately, so few people really come even remotely close to tapping into their potential. And I think I have a unique gift. I don't have many, but my unique gift is to work with people in the industry of financial services and help them, find and identify the tiger within. Start expecting more of themselves, believing more, coaching, teaching them on the how-tos, but also the mental mindset that goes along with that so that they can begin to experience abundance. And when I'm on the sidelines and I see people that come through my workshops that I have a positive impact and I'm a small part of changing their life for the better, that's my purpose now. I mean, I still cash my checks. I'm not a non-for-profit, but money to me today is nowhere near as relevant as it used to be. And now it's about having a huge impact on people and giving back.
Jim, you mentioned at the top that you had just a tendency, you got a big vision, I think is the word you used. Was that something that was built in, or was that a conscious choice? How did that develop? Because that was right there. That was very present in your initial answer about who you are. Something had to do with the size of the vision.
People ask the question all the time, nature or nurture, right? Like, were you born with that? I'm the youngest of 5 kids into a middle-class family. Neither one of my mom or dad went to college. Me and one of my brothers went to college and graduated. The other 3 siblings did not. So, the reality is my dad didn't have a big vision. My other 4 siblings don't have a big vision. So it's hard to say, genetically, but it started conceptually and started honing in more specifically. Really was, I'm going to do whatever I want, when I want, how I want, and not ask what it costs. And, within reason, I don't have a private jet. I don't have a 200-foot yacht. So there are limits, but for the most part, I wanted to live my life without looking at price tags. I wanted to go to the restaurant. I wanted to order what I want. I remember, I would only go out to dinner like twice a year. Like my dad's birthday. I don't know why we didn't go out on my mom's. My dad's birthday. And then, they would take the kids out for their birthdays, but it was limited. Like it wasn't even a nice restaurant. It was like, it was better than a Applebee's or a Denny's, but barely. But you were limited what you could order on your menu. And I just was a kid looking at it going, man, when I get older, I'm gonna order whatever the hell I want to order. I don't even care what the prices are.
Yeah.
And same thing with whatever wine I want to drink and car I want to drive. And, so it started conceptually like I want to lead a big life based on not ego or materialistic things that can fill my own insecurities, but just the lifestyle I want to lead. I'm going to join nice clubs. I'm going to fly first class. I'm going to buy nice clothes. I'm going to drive nice cars. Like I said, and it was conceptually, and, it was big that way. And, it was also big in a way that when I started doing something, like when I started P2P Group 10 years ago, after I sold my firm, I told my wife, I was 47, I'm going to start my own company. She goes, what are you going to do? I go,
I want to share something personal with you. I worked with Steve Lang and his Aura AI agency. That's AURA. That experience gave me a level of clarity I didn't realize I was missing. Steve has an ability to listen and reflect back what's actually there in a way that helps you see yourself clearly. What's changed most is my ability to speak about what I do with confidence and precision. If you're someone who knows you have something meaningful to offer, but you're not sure how to fully articulate it, I highly recommend working with Steve and Aura. It's been one of the most valuable investments I've made myself in my work. To learn more about Steve and his work, visit him on linkedin.com/Steve Lang, Aura AI Agency. That's linkedin.com/in/Steve Lang, Aura, AURA, AI Agency. The link is in the show notes.
I'm going to go with an idea I have in my head. And she's like, well, what happens if it fails? I'm like, I've never failed at anything. It's not going to fail. It's going to do wildly success. How do you know? I'm like, I just know, and I couldn't give her an answer. She's like, you're crazy, but it was just, it's like, I'm going to make it work. Failure's not an option, and whatever it takes. And so those is what I would say is in alignment with what I mean when I say I have a big vision.
Yeah. Yeah. You're the youngest of 5. I'm the oldest of 6. And we were like right in a row. So I get the whole going out to eat thing. I remember going through like McDonald's drive-through with my dad, and he's like, okay, I'm teaching you guys budget. Each got $2 to spend. And it was like, okay, do I want 2 burgers or 2 fries? And there's a part of you that's like, yeah, this sucks. I don't want to do this forever. That resonates with me. Of course, you've got constraints in life, but a life where you can have experiences without having to worry about the price tag. I love how proudly you said that. I think some people feel like you can't say that this day and age. And I just want to point that out. But Jim, you're widely recognized for your expertise in leadership development, sales mastery, and high performance behavior for financial professionals, as you touched on when you discussed your mission. Share your journey. How did you arrive here? You got into it at 47, started a new business. How did you really access this passion for training folks in the sales and insurance industry?
Yeah, 58 now. Started out of college in the financial services business with blind luck. The saying that says a blind squirrel can find an acorn occasionally. I was that blind squirrel. I had no idea. I went to college with corporate finance degree because it had something to do in the back of my mind with money. And I liked money. And so I'm like, I'll be a finance major, but I had no idea what I was going to do. And so anyways, I stumbled into the life insurance industry, which has evolved into overall holistic and integrated holistic financial planning. But 1989 started with a company called Northwestern Mutual. And I was there for 27 years. I was Rookie of the Year. I was on stage for all the different accolades. I got off to a great start. Today's dollars, I was making them 7 figures in my late 20s. And then I got appointed to a firm, grew that, almost doubled that in size. I started that at 33 and I got out at 47 and sold it. And then I started this company, P2P. That's basically been my journey throughout the financial services world. And what P2P is all about is helping financial advisors turn their true potential into real performance. I think we have unique ways in helping do that.
I had an insurance license early on, and I was one of those who I wish I would have stuck with it, knowing what I now know. But for a variety of different reasons. I just think sales is fascinating at this point in my life. But it's interesting. You worked with a lot of other professionals. But, you obviously rose to some heights with your career, and not everybody around you had that same success. What is it that, insurance professionals miss? Is there an obvious road sign that helps them access their potential?
That's a loaded question, but with the limited time we have today, because I could spend days on that,
Yeah.
I think the bottom line is they're too much head trash. They get in their own way. They have insecurities. They have unconscious self-defeated thinking. They don't have their mind straight. And, it's just not what I think or what I believe. What I know is our mind leads and our body follows, and your body has no ability to go anywhere where your mind doesn't go first. And if your mind is a barrier, a barricade, a speed bump, and it doesn't really see a very, very bright future and one that you feel you believe in and that you deserve, it's impossible to get there. So I think the long story short is that people get in their own way and they don't have the right headspace. They don't think big enough, expect big enough, and so on and so forth. And so I think, are there a lot of other things that even if you have that have to come along with that? Sure. But I think that's the biggest thing.
Well, I think for a week-long conversation, that was a pretty good synopsis of it. I think that was my experience, is that now, I do some sales and things for my business, and it really was a mindset shift of being like, if you go in there and think, I don't deserve this, or, whatever it might be that day, if you don't believe enough in the product, et cetera, there's so much there. And that's so interesting to me, the psychology behind things like that, about how, what you believe sort of works its way into reality one way or another.
No question. No question. And the reality of it is I have a talk I give. I'll give you the Cliff Note version of it, called the 4 C's. And the way it all started is because I'm a trainer, I'm a consultant, I'm a speaker, I'm an author. I had to really do some research around why is it that financial representatives, that's my industry, but you could do this in any industry. What's the problem? What's in their way? Why is it that they don't succeed? Why is it that the majority of them lead a life of mediocrity? Because at least in our industry, unlike being a doctor or a lawyer, it's not intellectual horsepower. I mean, I have friends that make 10 figures a year. They got a 2.0 in a shitty school. You know what I mean? So the reality is it's not that. So what is the problem? And ultimately what I concluded was the problem was a lack of self-confidence. And so then I'm like, well, the way I have looked at self-confidence is it's kind of genetic, it's biological, or at least it's built in the younger years. Like the confidence I had by the time I was 18 or 20 or 21 was influenced by my mom and dad and all that. You either grow up and you have self-confidence or you don't have self-confidence. We all know people that are in both camps. And then I came to realize, no, it's not that self-confidence. It's not the nature nurture one. It's the self-confidence in this industry. And it's the self-confidence in their ability to execute in this industry at a high level that holds them back. So therefore I thought, well, if that's the case, that's the problem, then what can I do to fix it? And the reality of it is what really drives self-confidence is competence. And so if you're really, really good at things that you need to be really, really good at, it gives you more confidence. And sales is all about having courage, which is a 3rd C. And if you don't have a lot of self-confidence, you're not going to have the courage to run through your fears. And so therefore, if you grow your competence and then you get more self-confidence, you'll have more courage. And then the overriding C on top of that, which is the 4th C, is conviction.
Yeah.
What you believe, to the point that you are on a mission. Like you have a deep embedded belief in the value that you bring and the purpose of what you do, and nobody's going to bring you down, and so those 4 C's are really important.
I think there's something that just hearing somebody like yourself say those things, like the 4 C's, and especially when you said conviction, I almost felt like I know exactly what you mean. I've been there, even though I referred to an experience when I was younger where I was very much had the head trash, as you said. I might have to borrow that from you, Jim. But there was a lot of head trash. And I think in the world we live in now, there's even more of an opportunity for that trash to get in there and sort of, take the wheel. But really, to me, it's almost like you're talking about something bigger than sales. You're talking about, the way that you live your life. Right.
Right.
And you mentioned that it has to do with sales, right? But this is something that seems to be, this was an identity that you seem to have took on.
The reality is, I think the identity is humble confidence. that has to be measured in a way that doesn't come across as cocky arrogance, that's a turnoff. In the Bible, biblically, the Bible preaches that fear and faith cannot coexist. In this secular world, in business, conviction and fear can't coexist. Or at least if conviction is strong enough, the fear is not going to overpower it and win. I mean, because we're human, we're always going to have some level of fear because we're emotional creatures, right? And what I'm talking about, by the way, goes all the way back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's the need to be loved, the need to be appreciated, the need to be respected, and most importantly, the need to belong, all of which you could say is the fear of what other people think of you. If you're going to have conviction, competence, confidence, and courage, and you're going to go forward, sometimes people aren't going to like you. Sometimes people aren't going to think you're doing things for their benefit, but maybe your selfish benefit to get paid and make commissions and all that kind of stuff. And if you have a deep enough conviction, it sounds harsh. I'm just trying to be blunt. You don't care what they think.
Yeah.
I know what I know. If I'm making a recommendation to a client, it has nothing to do with how I get paid. It has nothing to do with my ego. It has nothing to do with the trip I'm trying to qualify for. I took time to understand their situation. I'm an expert in my field, and I'm making recommendations that they need to do. A lot of times they don't like hearing that, because it's something that's not easy to do, or, save more money or buy more insurance, or,
Yeah.
And it could be taken the wrong way, but your conviction overcomes that fear, and then the world is your oyster. You become unstoppable, but it has to be authentic.
Yeah. This podcast, Jim, it started as I was trying to look at where personal success overlapped with fulfillment and like what that actually meant, right? Because I think you get to a point, like you actually said it. It's not about money anymore. There was a time where it was, but today it's another mission. And so one of the things, like my working, I think this is like 150 episodes in. My working sort of definition or I don't know, the lead that I'm working towards is something to do with just trusting yourself. And I hear that in what you're saying about conviction, right? You're like when you told the story about your wife, saying you're crazy, right? You believed. You said, well, I haven't failed at anything. And I'm not sure. I just think you were so convicted that the failures didn't occur to you as failures. It was just sort of, well, this is an obstacle we'll get around or circumvent.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I wonder what your thoughts on that is. We're talking about the same thing. There is something that I hear from everybody. I had one guy actually say, my mom taught me that you have to believe something so deeply that the world bends around you. And I was like, what? And I almost hear that in what you're saying here. Yeah. Where are we aligned? Where are we not aligned?
Totally. I mean, like I said, I think that's a statement. It's a compliment. I appreciate it. But if I were to expand on that, I couldn't agree with you more. By the way, I did not get that from a light switch or on a cliff. It was a evolutionary process, not a revolutionary process. I think I was set up for success the right way at 22, right out of college, with a potential for a bright future. But trust me, there were many stumbling blocks along the way. There were many rejections along the way, and how I've evolved through those to the level of a connection to my conviction, my purpose, and a belief that every failure is just one more step that I got to get around, because I know where I'm going and I'm going to get there, and nobody or no one thing or 10 things is going to stop me. My right arm off, my left leg off, whatever, I'm getting there, because failure's not an option. It's talk to marathon runners, when they start the race, who are really focused, and I'm crossing the finish. Like, I don't care how many cramps I have. I don't care, but I am crossing the finish line. And that's what it takes in life as well.
I'm glad you brought that up. One of the questions that I had is, what was a season in your life where you sort of felt like there was a lot of obstacles to get through, and what shift did you have to make to get around those? Is there anything that stuck out to you that's a story you tell often?
Well, it was a big one. I don't know how much you know about me or how much you read about me, but I'm deaf. And I went suddenly deaf. I wasn't born deaf. I hear you and everything now through a cochlear implant. And in 2001, I had a culmination of three things that were pretty significant. I was, 9/11 happened. Well, first of all, September 1st, I was appointed by Northwestern Mutual as a CEO, managing partner of a firm in the Chicago suburbs. And I was only 33 years old. And that was the mecca of the field. That's as high as you could get in the field. That was like a big, 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 big deal, right? And I made it. I was appointed September 1st. Then you got 9/11 happening 10 days later on November 27th. I got bit by a mosquito in my backyard that had West Nile, and it took my hearing from viral meningitis. It turned into viral meningitis and took my hearing a day and a half after I left the hospital. And then on October 6th, my dad, who was pretty close to it, 70 years old, died suddenly. So in a 37-day period, I was on the ultimate high where I got appointed as a managing partner. At 9/11, which changed the world, I got bit by a mosquito and took my hearing, and I lost my dad. When that happened, I couldn't get nor can anybody who loses hearing suddenly a cochlear implant for 6 months. Because what happens, I'll make a long story short, it's nerve endings in your inner ear, and through cortisone shots and steroids, they can bring them back. And it can take as much as 6 months for those nerve cells to come back. And they want to fight that good fight, and it can take up to 6 months. But after 6 months, they ain't coming back. And to have a cochlear implant, you hear artificially. So they go in surgically through your skull, and they put, artificial hearing components in and attach it to your brain. And so the reality is then you'll never get your hearing back. So they wait as long as they need to. So for 6 months, I was deaf. Then on top of that, a cochlear implant is not guaranteed to work. At that time, it was 2001. And so, about 55% of the time it worked. I think now it's up to about 80, 85, but still not 100%. Some people's brains don't adjust to the electronic components that are put inside your cochlea and attached to your brain. So mine did. During those 6 months, I had to communicate with people at work, like writing stuff on an erase board. I couldn't hear. And then 6 months after that, in April of 2002, I got a cochlear implant. So, what got me through that is, which is really what you asked me, was the fact that, and I did a main stage talk in front of 14,500 people called this, what was rooted from that story, which was when there's hope in the future, there is power in the present. When there's no hope in the future, you've lost all power in the present. And so when I first lost my hearing, that hope was you take them in your mouth, pills, 8 different steroid pills. That was my hope. Well, that didn't work. Yeah. So then I went and got a series of cortisone shots that were long needles that went in my inner ear. Okay, that was the hope. And then after that, when that didn't work, the cochlear implant became my hope. And I always had hope, and the hope never shut. The door never shut. So I just stayed focused on one of these things is going to work, right? Yeah. And I remember in solitude and prayer, I said, God, just let this last thing work, and I will spend the rest of my life impacting others on how a dark black cloud always has a silver lining, and you can make the best out of it. I will be an example to others who are going through a dark black cloud. And God willing, I got that cochlear. It worked. And so that's what got me through it.
That's an incredible story. Thank you for sharing that. As you have one of the highest points in your life to the lowest points in your life, what is the dialogue with yourself here? There's some people who, just like you said earlier, they might just be like, well, that was it. I deserve this or something. But there's something that happened with you where you said the thing I zeroed in on, you focused on hope. And I think that's really powerful, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. But what was the internal dialogue that got you through that?
I tried to stay positive, tried to stay focused on hope. I surrounded myself with that was conducive to that, but I'm also human. So there were days where in those 6 months, I was in tears. My wife was holding me, hugging me, assuring me it was going to be okay because I got to a low, but then I quickly rallied. I didn't have those self-pity parties during those 6 months, maybe lasted a half a day, not weeks or months, but you're still going to have them. You're still humans. It was, just times going, are you kidding me? Like, okay, 9/11 happens, then I lose my hearing, then I lose my dad. I'm like, what's going on? So, but then also, you can have a mentality that things happen for a reason, and made me a better man. I am definitely a better husband, better father, a better leader, a better business person, a better man because that happened to me.
Well, I want to talk about the book, all right. Bridge Your Gap, if that's all right. So this book came out in 2019, Bridge the Gap, Sales Strategies and Systems for Becoming a Top Financial Advisor. And you discuss 3 gaps. There's a mindset gap, skill set gap, execution gap. And I guess, which one do you see as most underestimated by advisors that you train?
Mindset, as I said earlier, huge. I like in life, business, and in the financial services world, very similar and correlated to I'm passionate about golf, but I'm not good enough to be a golf instructor. But if I was, and you came to me to redo your golf swing, the very first thing I would work on is your grip, your posture, your balance, your stance, because that is the foundation and the framework of a great golf swing. And if you don't have those things right, you don't have prayer to have a great golf swing, right? And so in my work, that's the very first thing I start with in our workshops is the fact I want to get their heads straight, because they don't have a chance of tapping into their true potential if they don't get the self-defeated thinking out of their head and get a big old jar of empowered thinking that's authentic poured in. They got to get their headspace right. And I think that's a big, big deal. And one of just maybe 4 things that makes P2P so different, because there is more, I like to call it noise, but there are more options now than ever for financial advisors who are frustrated, stuck in a rut, who really want to grow and really want to be excellent, that they could sign up for and go to, that are all done by supposedly subject matter experts, gurus who have been there, done that, know how to do it. And now they have committed their career to teaching, coaching, like I do, right?
Yeah.
So one of the biggest things you got to do is you got to differentiate. Why would I sign up for Jim Effner's P2P? I got this, and they all say they're the best. They all say they're good, but there's 4 things that I think really differentiate us. And the first is this topic that I start with headspace. I've never seen any of these other programs spend a lick of time on it. It gets right to the logical world of, this is how you make a phone call and get an appointment. This is how you sell life insurance. This is how you get a referral. This is how you close. This is how you overcome an objection. And those things are important. But before we even go into any of those things, we spend a lot of time about, an individual's why and their headspace and getting it straight. And if you think about this, Ryan, it's pretty phenomenal. I could share a screen, but I'll just tell you for now is that there have been books written for 100, I think. Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich is the oldest one that I've read that's on this topic. Then there's Earl Nightingale's The Strangest Secret, Simon Sinek, Understand Your Why. There's a bunch of them, like 6 of them that have been over a span of about 110 or 115 years. They all say the same thing. It's all the same message. So what they knew 115 years ago hasn't changed, is still as evident today as it was 115 years ago. And that is that your head's really important and how you think is really important. And the vision of what you see and how the degree in which you believe it is very important. And a lot of people don't spend any time there. And when people come to our workshops, we spend a lot of time in that space. And that's one of, I think, 4 things that makes us very different and very unique.
What are the other 3?
The other 3 is that I wrote most salespeople in general wing it. And most sales conferences, workshops, books, and all that are all about, the sales ideas. Here's how to do this. Here's how to do that. There's sales ideas. And we don't teach sales ideas because sales ideas are in alignment with the old saying that says, geez, I went to a seminar and I got this sales idea and it works so well, I stopped doing it, right? Because the only way a sales idea works is you got to remember it, you got to think about it, and then on your feet, you got to use it, right? And what I teach at P2P is get out of your own way. And winging it is a slang term for doing and saying and behaving in alignment with how you feel and what you think at that any given moment. Well, how humans feel and think is a roller coaster. Not everybody's got their A+ game 24/7, 365, which is why salespeople get a wide variety of results because they're emotional, they wing it, and they don't have sustainable, consistent results. And so a lot of these other things that people go to are a number of tips and ideas. We don't do that. We teach systems. So how to get a referral, which I call prospecting, is an 8-step system. How to take a fact finder when you meet a potential new client for the first time is a 9-step system. How to put together a plan is a 7-step system. How to close a life insurance sale is a 7-step system. Step here, step here, step here, and get it to the point that it is systematic in nature between you and your team, where it's like on autopilot. And in Jim Collins' book, The Flywheel, now it's just Holland, because people don't run businesses, or at least good businesses. Systems run good businesses, and people run systems. So we teach systems. I don't think anybody else does. And we teach systems for the entire sales cycle, from how to get the original name and number, a referral, a lead, whatever, all the way through how to go through an annual review and nurture that relationship forever. So that is the second thing, is systems. The third thing is our workshops are spread out over 6 months. They're 3 separate ones. I got in late last night from Milwaukee. I live in Las Vegas, and our workshops are about all in 30 hours, but we deliver them 10, then 60 days in between, then 10, 60 days in between, then 10. So you can take bite-sized pieces and then implement it, and then come back and get real live coaching as to what worked and what doesn't work, as opposed to just drinking from a fire hydrant, all of it. You can't retain it, And so we spread it out. I think that's very unique. The next thing is that we have a coach that we now have put 2,000 people plus through our workshops. And our coach, a woman by the name of Kelly, has coached every single one of them. And her job is not like a normal coach where you meet once a month and the coach says, so what do you want to talk about this month? Her job is very specific, and that is how to effectively implement what Jim just taught you in the last workshop. There's nothing she hasn't seen yet. So she helps them and holds their arm, and helps them along the way implement. And then last but not least, it took me 3.5 years to do this. Everything I teach in those workshops is on our online academy. And I believe strongly in that repetition is the mother of all learning. And, in football, when an offense runs a new play, they say, run it again, run it again, run it again. We're going to run it again until you guys know this in your sleep. Yeah. So the coach has the confidence that when I call it during the game, we're going to execute, right? And that's practice. It's perfect practice. It's repetition. And so when our reps leave, like these reps did yesterday afternoon, in the next 60 days, they can watch all the lessons I taught as many times as they need to, as they're trying to implement it, and ask our coach the questions. So we handle the mindset. We deliver systems, not sales ideas. We have a coach, and we have a whole online academy to embrace repetition. When you culminate those 4 things, that's why we get the data that we get in terms of the growth of advisors that go through our program. But as you can imagine, Ryan, I still have the secret sauce. People who go through our workshop only grow when A, they want to grow for their own reasons and they understand why. And B, they're willing to put in the work, the time, and the effort that it takes to do it. It's not easy. It's not like they meet me and they're like, oh my gosh, I found Jesus. Why didn't I meet Jim 5 years ago? And everything's just fixed. And so not everybody that goes to our workshops grow, because they're not there for the right reasons. They don't want it bad enough, so they still got to want it.
I think one of the most powerful things I heard what you said, and this is in my experience, I had this happen where I'm a coach. I work as a personal success coach with folks, and as I was being coached, the implementation, there's always a gap. It's like, okay, I understand this. This seems like it would be even a beautiful system. I even understand the system, but the implementation, like going back and being like, okay, what was your activity like in between workshop 1 and 2? That whole integration has been key to like moving progress forward on. And I think there's a huge insight in that.
It's huge. And then, I would say if I had to come up with a fifth too, is I hold them accountable. What gets said that I laugh and I'm like, yeah, you're kind of right, because it's true. I put the fear of God in them. What I mean by that is that yesterday, one of the things I taught was prospecting. One of the 8 steps is language, how you ask for a referral. You got to be great at that. All right. And so I do it for them. I do it live. I role play it. And then I give them the expectation, when you get back home, watch that on the academy as many times as you need to watch it until you have it down perfectly. And when your ask comes back, in 60 days, I'm going to randomly call on about a third of you. And you don't know who you are. And you don't want to be embarrassed and you don't want to look bad. And I'll know. So when I call your name, I want it to be a drop the mic moment and I want to give you a high five and I want you to celebrate. So because they leave going, shit, what happens if he calls on me? So they do the work. Most workshops don't test. They don't hold people accountable, because it's uncomfortable. I don't care. It's important.
It makes a lot of sense because I think it's that avoiding that uncomfortability is what is pushing them towards the growth, right? I mean, it's just that simple. Yeah. So in your book, you write that performance is 90% emotional. That's an interesting idea. And especially when you talk about systems and whatnot, but what is the most common emotional barrier that advisors refuse to admit that they have?
Well, let me give an overriding answer to that question more at like 30,000 feet. And that is, at least in my industry, in my business, I don't know if it is in real estate sales, car sales, pharmaceutical sales. I'm only in this industry, financial services sales. And so in our industry, what I tell everybody right up front is this business is a deeply emotional business. It is not a logical business. It might be 5 or 10%, maybe 15 at best. Let's give it 15. It's 85% emotional. Okay. And so what does that mean? First of all, reps, advisors need to understand that because until they meet me, up until then, they've only been behaving logically. They've only been behaving logically, so, and then they get frustrated and don't understand why people don't take action. They say to you, I'll sum this down, not this court, not this quick, but just for limited time. What would you want to do for your family, Ryan, if you passed away and you're now 35 and you got 3 young kids? He said, well, I want to pay off the mortgage. I want to educate my kids and I want my wife to have $100,000 a year for her life expectancy. So now I take out my calculator and I say, okay, what's your mortgage? I got that. College education, where we plan for? Okay, got that. Net present value of the dollars, and your widow now $100,000 a year for 52 years until her life expectancy. Okay, I got that. I had it all up and said, Ryan, you need 2.1 million. Does that make sense? And you go, sure, yeah, that makes sense. And then they go to say, okay, well, look, here's the application and let's buy it. And then you're like, well, let me think about it. Let me talk to my wife. And then the rep calls you back after you leave without buying, and you don't call them back, and you don't call them back. And the next thing you know, the rep never meets you ever again. And they're wondering, like, a stupid, like, I did the math. I used the calculator. Why didn't you buy the life insurance, right? Because the numbers are the numbers. You could use 12 different calculators. If those things that you told me are important to you, you need 2.2 million of life insurance. It is what it is. Come on, Ryan. What's so hard about it? I got the application right here. Let's get it started. And reps don't get that. That's logic. That's numerical math. And that's not, people don't make financial decisions that way. No. They don't at all. And, so the reality is there's all kinds of things in their way. And reps have to ask a lot of questions and they got to become really good listeners. So if I met you and you were 40 years old and you were successful, and you made whatever, make up a number, $300,000 a year, but really the only 2 assets you had were in your 401k and the equity in your house, which means that your disposable income every month you pretty much spend, and you have since you got out of college, which is now 18 years, a superficial starting question, but that doesn't mean anything. It's the question to the question to the question to the question where the golden nugget lies. You got to peel back the layers of the onion. I say, so Ryan, I'm doing a good job of listening. Over the last 18 years, you've never developed the ability to save money on your own. Why do you think that is? Yeah. And you'll get a token answer, some bullshit answer. And then ask another question. And then another question and another question. And then that's where a lot of the golden nuggets occur, and people spend money for really, I don't want to go as far as saying stupid reasons, because that sounds bad. They're real. They're not stupid. And a psychologist would say, never use that word, but like to mask their own insecurities, like to create an identity with their friends that they're not. But if they buy the Louis Vuitton purse and the Rolex watch, their friends will think they're more successful than they are. That makes them feel good. Those are not logical decisions. You don't buy that life insurance because of the fact that, you can't come to grips with your own mortality. You're like, okay, yeah, if I died today, that number's right, Jim, but I'm not dying for 50 more years. So I ain't buying it. How does one come to grips with their own mortality? Like, you're right. Hopefully you're right, but there is a chance. So it's emotional. So I gave you a couple examples. We don't have enough time to give you a ton, but and by the way, it's the same thing with personal fitness and health. Somebody who's obese and smokes, logic tells them they should not smoke, they should eat better, and they should work out more. That's logic.
Yeah.
But it's hard for them. It's very hard for them for a lot of reasons. And some go buoy back to childhood, so it's the same thing.
Yeah. My gosh, somebody told me once, and this came up while I was listening to you, is that, every time you buy something, you're doing it to expand your identity, or you're moving into who you want to be, right? And that's, so whether you buy, the Louis Vuitton purse or whatever, that's strictly emotional. There occurs to me, and this is where I sort of draw a blank. I'm obviously not in that industry, but it's like, how do you, it's sort of an art, right? To sort of be able to find what you referred to as those emotional nuggets, right? And be able to make it, bring it into the emotional realm, because really it is something that is important, right? And functions in that emotional realm.
Yeah.
I mean, is there a system for that?
Absolutely. There's a system for that. It's really, I tell everybody in my workshops, I never, ever, ever, ever want you selling a product again. Whether it is financial investments for college planning for children, or for saving, or for retirement, whether it's life insurance, whether it's disability insurance, I don't ever want you selling that ever again. What I want you doing is only solving problems, right? So those vehicles are the tool, or I like to call it the solution to the problem. So the first thing in the system is that I know, because I'm in the industry, if I'm taking a fact finder on you very early on, what your problems are. But until you own them, you recognize them, it doesn't matter what I see, right? And then there's a whole nother level after that. You have to have a problem, or problems plural, own it. But then most importantly, you have to have a deep desire to get rid of it and solve it. And if you don't have both, then you can't be my client. And I can't do that. I can help you. My systems help reps ask questions and go through paths that are genuine, not manipulative, genuine, to help clients come to their own conclusions of the problems that they have. But then they also have to spend time on identifying and working with them as to what level is their desire to solve them. Somebody who's 50 pounds overweight knows they have a problem. You won't have to have them step on a scale to say, hey, dude, you got a problem. They know, they just don't have a strong enough desire to solve it yet.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, the psychology of it all, right? Because there is some, like you said, there is a system to it. There's multiple systems, right? To sort of bringing awareness to this. And that seems like that's part of what the advisor's role really is to sort of be dialed into this stuff. And I think that can seem scary, I think, to some people, even if they're in the business.
Yeah. And another really good example that there's an art to and a system is that at the end of the day, because it doesn't matter, it's just true. When I first call on you as a financial advisor, you have your wall up, you have your guard up. You immediately are thinking, I'm going to try to sell you something you don't need. How do I, all the stuff that's not good, right? And so what I really need to do, and the quicker the better, is to get you not to think or feel, but to know that you can implicitly trust me, that I genuinely have your back and care about you, and that I know what I'm doing. And there's an art to that. And by the way, it's not taught, it's caught. If I met you after 15 minutes and you said, I trust this guy, and somebody put you on the spot and said, why? Your probably most authentic, true answer would be, I can't explain it, I just feel it. And that's an art, but it's really, really important, because once a potential client can implicitly trust an advisor, genuinely know that they care about them and that they're a subject matter expert in their field, the rest of it's downhill.
Yeah, I mean, if that's endlessly fascinating to me, Jim. So thank you for following me there. Just sort of following curiosity. I'm way off script here, but I want to talk about P2P, and I want to go back to something you said at the beginning. You're 47 years old. You're like, I'm going to start this business, and you sort of had to talk your wife into it. What inspired this? Was it something that grew over time? You're like, I want to teach this to people. I want to bring this alive.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about that, but tell me more about how the company came to be.
Yeah. So I feel like a lot of these questions you asked me, I could go with the long answer, the short answer, and I got to figure out this real quickly how to articulate the short answer. So when you asked me adversity where I had to go through barricades, it was pretty obvious for me to choose the beginning of my managing partner where I lost my hearing. I went deaf, my dad, because that's pretty significant, right? And that's all in my book. By the way, the book is a third of it is my personal story, and 2/3 of it is a how to and manual textbook for all my systems and being great in the business and bridging your gap. And another chapter in my book, because I'm very transparent and vocal about this, is that I got fired from Northwestern Mutual. And I took over that agency September 1st of '01, and I left in June of 2015. I had significant equity in it. So it's not like I was fired in the traditional corporate world and I got 6 months severance. I left with enough money to retire, but the truth is I got fired. And those days, the Northwestern Mutual offices were very similar to the lifestyle of an NFL head coach. You made a really, 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 really lot of money, but you also had huge targets and huge expectations. So I didn't get fired because I did anything wrong. I didn't get fired because I mismanaged money. I didn't get fired for discrimination, anything wrong. I just didn't hit a target for one too many years, and they let me go. And I realized that, and I was out of 90 offices at the time, I was 16th in the country in every growth measurement, 16th out of 90. But every city and territory you had different targets. And the targets for Chicago were just ridiculously huge, right? Immediately when they appointed my successor, his target was 1/3 of what mine was with the exact same firm. But that's not me being a victim. My point is, I just wanted to emphasize I didn't do anything wrong. And when I walked away, I had a realization that although I felt like I was self-employed, I really was married to Northwestern Mutual. I didn't have a boss. I didn't have a salary. I didn't have vacation time. I didn't have any of that. I had a firm and it paid a tremendous amount of money to me by owning the firm. And in order for me to continue to own the firm, I had to stay compliant, which I obviously did. And I had to hit these targets. And then Northwestern stays out of your way, right? You don't have a boss with, but if you don't hit the targets, they're like, all right, we're going to go find somebody who can. And so I got let go and I realized I wasn't in control. And so I just made the decision I'm never, ever, ever going to be in that situation again, ever. And so I was ready to take this idea and turn it into a company. And 3 of my very best friends who were also, and still are today, they're almost retired now, managing partner CEOs in different parts of the country, said to me, Jimmy, you can start your company if you want, but you owe it to yourself to go interview with the other big insurance financial firms because you have no idea how powerful your resume is. What you've done is amazing. And, you've known nothing but Northwestern Mutual since college. So go interview. So I did it to appease them. And every time I walked, and I got 3 offers within 10 days. And every time I walked out of one of those offices, I felt like there's no way I want to do that. It was just a horrible feeling. And so I said no. And that's why I said to my wife, I'm going to start my own company on my idea. She's like, you're going to walk away from a 7-figure offer? I'm like, yeah. And that's when she said, you're crazy. She's like, you're crazy. It worked out, And so the journey of that, the origin was I wanted to be in control. I never wanted to be let go. And by the way, I've got 3 friends that were CEOs of significant 100, 200, $300 million companies that were privately owned and bought out by private equity people on Wall Street that got huge targets because those guys buy those companies to do 5X in like 3 years and flip it. And all 3 of them lost their jobs and they were studs. They didn't do anything wrong. They were out of control. That wasn't in their control. And so I was in that and I just never wanted to be in that ever again.
Wow. That's an incredible story. I mean, that's just
board. I don't have a board.
Yeah.
I'm in control of me. I love that.
How do people begin to engage? Is it sort of business to business? Do people come to you individually? What's that look like?
People do not come to me individually. I don't do like you do coaching. I don't do coaching one-on-one. I don't work with individuals. I do a lot of public speaking, but the public speaking is really free advertisement. I actually get paid to speak, but I get a lot of business after I speak, right? And so I wouldn't really say that's what I do for a living. I speak so we can get bigger customers and clients. But, I do, for example, all new agent sales training for three very significant, I'm not going to say it on this podcast, but three very significant, you would know all of their names, insurance companies. So when an insurance agent starts at any of these three companies, they go through my training for life insurance sales. The first year they're an agent. Those are significant contracts, and they are all customized to each one of those companies. And they took a lot of time to build them. I wouldn't go as far as saying they're on autopilot now, but I'm around if they need me. I make appearances once or twice a year so they see my face, but it's all video online training with lessons and everything else that is a virtual academy that's built. And that's the kind of business that I really like, because it's residual income. There's significant income. So that's why I don't do individual coaching. That happens mainly from me speaking at industry conferences where tons of companies in my industry have leaders and executives in the audience. And then they'll come up to my booth after and ask me questions, and then I'll follow up with them. But it's not easy. People that, young people, in typical profile, Ryan, of people that sit in my live workshops, which is another thing I do, which is also sponsored by these companies. They think I just fall out of bed and money just falls from the sky. Like it's just so easy, right? I still get told no a lot. I still have people not call me back a lot, to the point that someday I'm like, why the hell am I doing this? I don't need the money anymore, but I'm motivated and I love doing it. And when I'm doing it, I don't even feel like I'm working, and anything is worth fighting for. So, and also competitive. I like that. I like when people tell me no, and I'm like, well, you might tell me no, but pretty soon you're going to tell me yes.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like hunting, I kind of like that. A little bit of a sick mind, but it's really word of mouth, industry associations, stuff like that.
So Jim, how has your definition of success changed over the course of your life?
Well, I told you my fourth quarter is about impact. My first quarter was about survival. People are like, you made a ton of money right out of the gates, but it was all relevant. I was spending it all, right? The second quarter was about ego. It was about ego. I'm somewhat ashamed to admit that, but I'm an honest, authentic individual. It was about, at every conference, who had the most ribbons. It was about how people saw me. It was about being the big boy in the room, and ego. And that's the least of my thoughts now. So it's evolved, right? And the third quarter was about growing my net worth and my financials personally so I could become super independent. That was another thing when Northwestern let me go. I wasn't quite there yet. I mean, I could have retired on a lifestyle equivalency to the top 2% of Americans, but not to the level, well, I become accustomed to. I would have to start looking at price tags and stuff like that, right? And so I needed to get to a bigger number, and that was important to me, because once you hit that number, then work is defined by you do what you do because you love doing it, not because you need a paycheck anymore. And that's the ultimate freedom. And so that was my third quarter. Now it's about impact. So it's evolved. That's success to me has evolved. And it also evolves with, tell my kids this and they roll their eyes and they're like, yeah, dad, whatever. But life is about wisdom and experience that comes with time. Like I didn't necessarily believe this when I was 30 or 35, but it's true. And that's, people who are 50 know a lot more than people who are 30, and people who are 70 know a lot more than people who are 50, just because of time. It's a natural process of wisdom through life experiences that gain knowledge.
So what is next for P2P? What is the next sort of evolution of sort of communicating and executing that impact look like for your company?
Nothing new, just bigger and better than what we're doing now. I told you we have 3 companies. If I could get that to 10, that would be massive, right? And then stick around, till I'm in my mid 70s, health willing, if my health stays, to be a focal point. Like how when a working CEO retires, they sometimes might become chairman of the board. And, they're there once a month. They're a figurehead. They were the pioneer of the company. They don't want to be the CEO anymore and all that stress and pressure. They just want to be I could be chairman of the board and work when I want and, have more freedom, but yet still have some purpose, not be totally retired, and have a substantial residual revenue stream. So that's where I would like to go. That's what I would like to get to.
So you mentioned that this fourth quarter in your career, if you will, is about impact. You mentioned 10 companies, but how will you know if you've sort of hit that goal?
I can't answer that. I don't have a number. It's not objectively stated. I'll know when I'll know. It'll be a gut intuitive feeling, you know? And I do have a coach, by the way, the same guy for 19 years. I think the world of him. And he's 74 years old and he's dialed it way back. He used to coach a lot more, but he doesn't like that answer. Like he wants me to have a number. He wants me to have a goal. He wants me to have something that is very identifiable to chase. And I'm just resilient to that. You know, first of all, I don't have to do it. That makes a big difference. It's not like if I don't do it, I'm screwed. You know, it's just fun. So yeah, but that's my answer to him. And he doesn't like that answer.
There's something that so as a coach, there's definitely something that I see there that I want to, dig into more, but I also love that you're like, no, I'm resilient to it. I'm not budging on my answer there.
Yeah.
There's something that sort of, because I'm sitting here trying to like sum up, there's something like authenticity and like just the word integrity comes up, but not the way we use it. Like, just aligned, that's sort of the feeling I get about speaking with you today, Jim. So, you're just very clear about what the alignment looks like all the way down.
Yeah, I take that as a compliment. I would just say the last thing on that coach is that, his whole modus operandi, and he's a really good person, is people build businesses with entrepreneurial spirit like you've done for the end result of selling them and cashing them in and taking money off the table. And I have no goal of selling P2P because I just don't see anybody replicating me. And I'm not building the business to be far above and beyond me. And that irritates him. And he's like, I have no skin in the game, Jim. I don't have a dog in the hunt, but as your coach and after working with you for 19 years, I love you, bro. And what I know being 74 that I don't think being 58 is I don't want you to have any regrets. I don't want you to be 74, look back and say, shit, I should have really had a better strategic model to build my successor so I could have sold it. And it just doesn't do anything for me. So I still stick with it that I don't need to sell it. That residual income slowly goes away. I've got plenty of net worth so that building my business to be able to sell it has no motivation for it.
Yeah. Well, that's endlessly fascinating as well. So, I want to be mindful of our time here, Jim. And I feel like in this conversation, I have sat firmly in the student chair. So I've taken notes for myself as well. I think you just have so much wisdom and such a willingness to want to share this. And I think that's powerful. And I think that is sort of, again, on this mission to sort of figure out what success means in the human element. That's what you're talking about when you refuse to put a number on there. There's something ethereal and hard to pin down there that resonates with me as well. So
thank you.
Yeah.
That's exactly why I do these, by the way. I started this about 1.5 years ago because I thoroughly enjoyed, like I told you at the beginning, I enjoy being interviewed. I enjoy speaking from my heart, my experience, so that others who might benefit from what I have to share, I enjoy it, but I have no intention, desire, or care whether my podcast draws P2P business. I just enjoy being interviewed. Man, I would like to have some words of wisdom that I haven't shared yet. And I'm sure if I gave enough time to it, I could think of something, but you did a great job asking a lot of questions and some deep topics and a back history of me and I think I was very transparent and vulnerable and real and forthcoming that I don't really think there's anything that would be like super significant that, I haven't shared or words of wisdom that I would give. I would say that, really, really focus to the listeners out there. What do you want and why do you want it? And why is it important to you? And the more you hone in on that, you will be willing to do the work that's necessary habitually, that, by the way, 99% of the rest of the population is not willing to do because the desire and the intensity of it is more powerful than the pain of doing things that are hard to do. When you get a connection to that, you can move mountains, right? That is what I would say.
Beautifully put. I think that just to share my own part in that is that I think there is something magical. For me, it happened a little bit later in life, but there's something magical when all of a sudden, when you see the lighthouse, you don't notice the storm anymore. Sort of, you know what I mean? It's the storm's there. It's like, if it's just the storm, it's the storm and it sucks. But that storm loses a lot of power when you know where you're going. So, yeah. Jim, it's been a great conversation. Thank you so much for your time today and for what you're doing. This sounds kind of generic, but there's a lot of power in what you're doing and why you're doing it. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you bet. And if anybody who is listening wants to hear more of what I do and get access, our website is www.jimeffner.com, and you can get pretty much anything you want there, or you could also go to Amazon and buy my book, the one you referred to, Bridge Your Gap.
And we'll have all those linked in the show notes as well. So thanks so much for your time.
Nice to meet you, Ryan.
This conversation resonated with you. I hope you take a moment to sit with what Jim shared with you today. This was a conversation about more than just sales. It was about conviction, identity, resilience, the mindset that shapes performance, and the kind of internal clarity that allows someone to keep moving even when life gets hard. Jim's story is a reminder that success is not just built through strategy, it's built through belief and through courage, through doing the work required to close the gap between what's possible for your life and what you're actually willing to claim. You can find his book, Bridge Your Gap, Sales Strategies and Systems for Becoming a Top Financial Advisor on Amazon. And you can connect with Jim on LinkedIn. Jim's site describes his mission as helping financial advisors bridge the gap between their potential and their performance. And his book is presented there as a resource built around those systems and strategy. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the Personal Success Podcast at youtube.com/Personal Success Podcast. Don't miss future conversations on success, fulfillment, leadership, and the deeper work of becoming who you really are. Until next time, keep defining success for yourself and keep moving towards the life that's truly yours.